Alrighty, I think we can go ahead and get started. People will start filtering in as we begin here. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Today we are hearing from one of our other sponsors, Wayfair, specifically Alfredo Alvarez, who's going to be teaching you about React Native, which is a fantastic toolkit for making mobile applications and the like. So without further ado, Alfredo, take it away.
Hi, my name is Alfredo Alvarez, like they just mentioned. I'm going to be talking about React Native. And the reason I chose this topic is because it's a pretty good toolkit to use in hackathons. It's pretty fast for you to get able and to get running. And it's a really easy to showcase your applications once you do it on it. This presentation is basically going to be like a set of slides, and then I'm going to jump into code in different places. And we're just basically going to go through kind of like a showcase of the components that you can use in React Native. So first of all, who am I? My name is Alfredo Alvarez, like I mentioned. I'm a senior engineer, being manager at Wayfair. I work in Storefront. This is the part of Wayfair that basically does the customer piece. We basically do the store where you go buy and manage those UIs. For the most part, we do work in React a lot. My teams are specifically focused on doing recommendations, like showing those recommendations on site, and the interactions on how you purchase a recommendation. On the experience of buying sets and multiples, which is basically if you're buying, say, a living room set or a kitchen set, or some silverware, which brings more than one, any product of that type is something that one of my teams does. And then the last team that I have is called Furniture, Decor, Custom, and Samples. And basically, this is a team that takes the experiences that are complex, like buying a sectional or something like that, and works on getting that ready through the different pages in Wayfair. Before, I've been doing this for about 9 months on this current role. And before this, I was still at Wayfair for the past 2 years before that too. And I was working on what's called Product Edition. And it's how we add products into the Wayfair catalog. Cool. So the first thing is, do I use React Native at work? And the answer is, I do it only during company hackathons. I really, really like the framework personally. I think it's, like I mentioned before, it's a way of doing a fast product and showing it. On my day-to-day, I use React a lot. Most of our storefront front end, it's basically built on React technology. And in my personal life, I use React Native a decent amount. Some examples is I built an app for my hometown. I come from Puerto Rico, and my hometown of Isabela needed an app for the 200-year anniversary. And I built that using React Native. And I also built an app for my wife's business, which is an optometry kind of shop. So I'm pretty much an enthusiast of React Native. So with that said, what is React Native? It's an application that lets you use React to build cross-platform mobile applications. Basically, it supports native iOS and Android apps built using React and JavaScript. There are a lot of applications currently on the web that have been built on React Native. For example, the Facebook mobile one and the Tesla mobile app are some of them. So why people want to use React Native? So it's a cross-platform application, like I just mentioned, in mobile. It has even gone and gotten some forks that let you do it on desktop. For example, Microsoft built a fork of React Native that they used to build Skype client a few years ago. And basically that's compatible with Android and iOS. So you could build for PC, Android, and iOS if you use that fork. It's easy to deploy and demo thanks to the Expo CLI. So one of the things that React Native has is it has 2 CLIs that come with it, the native and the Expo. Expo basically lets you do things on the web browser. And by enabling you to do your development on the web browser, it allows a really, really fast experience. The native CLI allows you to build things in JavaScript and React and basically interact with components that are built in other languages specific for the phones. The other thing is because of the native transpilation, it has really good performance and native performance on every single platform. It's not being run when it's actually running on the phone. It's not being run on an interpreter, so it actually runs pretty decently. It compares pretty decent to like an app built, for example, in Swift on iOS. It supports live reloading while you're developing, which we're gonna see today. And honestly, like that makes demoing it pretty easy, and it makes it developing like really easy because you can like make a change and see the change happen at the same time. And like I just mentioned, you can support native components and GIS-based React components. Cool. So like I was saying, one of the things that I think makes it really targeted for hackathons is that the install process is pretty fast. You download Node.js, you run npm install -g expo CLI, and basically once that's done, you're basically ready to run. I'm going to show what you do from here to like basically just start an app real quick, and then we'll jump back into the presentation. So this is my folder basically on my computer. So all we need to do is run one command, expo init. In this case, I'm going to call it presentation project, just so I know it's a project that I created for this presentation. I will run that, and he's going to ask us, what do we want? Which type of project we want. Personally, I normally pick the selection of tabs TypeScript because it basically brings navigation kind of set to get started with it. This is normally a template that I use, and it's like my preferred one. So I'm just going to click on it real quick. That's going to basically use npm to start installing the dependencies and basically create our project. Normally, this is done within a minute or two. Let's see. Okay, it's taking a little bit while we're doing live, so I'm going to shortcut it real quick and okay, so I cannot hang. So I'm just gonna like cancel it and then just open a product that I have pre-made before. So once you run that, if you did this npm start web, basically it's gonna start running. It's going to start running, sorry, npm run web. It's going to start running the web server, basically for the app. And this is basically it, where it's doing the bundle, the webpack compile, and it's showing you what's going on your application. So once you have this running, you can basically see your app on the web browser. This was an app that I basically built just to like show different demos to today. It's basically built on the standard template. So the normal standard template only has 2 tabs. And these things that you see down here, you don't have them. Those are just like demos that I added in. I'm going to be using this app to the rest of the presentation just to show basically the capabilities of the system. All right, cool. So how does this work? Basically, React Native, what they did is they created elements that, depending on the target platform, they basically transpile. So for example, if in React Native, when you're coding, you use a text input and you're loading on Expo on web, that's going to be translated to an input. And if you are like using it in Android, it's going to be an edit text or the equivalent in iOS or whatever the tabs that the target platform that you are basically running it is on. We're going to see that React Native has like a pretty failed library and basically like pretty good third-party support. And we'll see that's representation. So just to get some basics for people that haven't used React a lot, I'm going to minimize this so we can see the entire slide. This is basically what a functional component in React looks like. If we looked at the top, here we have our imports, button, style sheet, text, and view. They're coming directly from the React Native library. And here is where we're importing it. Down here, we're basically declaring our props. Because I'm using TypeScript, I basically have a typed interface saying exactly what my props are. Here are like my methods that I'm going to be used as event handlers. And down here where you see the return, this basically it's our UI components. And we can basically put any UI component that can nest inside of here. And down here, if you can see where it says like accessibility label, decrement, and color red, those are basically props that I'm passing to other components that are basically like, that are static, sorry. Here's how you create styles. So for example, stylesheet.create, and then basically you can create styles for the components and apply them. If you look here at the view, to apply them, you basically do styles.button. So it's very similar to using CSS or in JavaScript if you've done any web development. And then like, just like you do in ES6, you basically export your component at the bottom to basically give it a default name. Okay. This is what it looks like when you use it. And for example, here, the component, this is the component that I was showing before. It's called hello. And we're passing the name, my name, and then the enthusiasm level, which is basically going to give the exclamation marks. I'm going to jump back into code and basically just show how that's working. So this is the component that we were looking at. In here, basically, it's where we have the logic. Basically, every time the enthusiasm level, it changes. It basically calls the method get exclamation marks, and it just adds a exclamation mark at the end of the code. So we pull this up, and we come here to my tab 1. You can see here the code for that component, and then doing plus will basically increase the exclamation marks, and doing minus will decrease them. If we go and change the code, let's say we add this, and we come back, the application basically like reloaded, so we can basically get kind of a similar experience to web development, even though this is meant for an app. This component is very similar to one that is on the React TypeScript guidelines. Cool. Oh, I also want to show how you add this into. So basically, we're adding this on screen 1. And to add it, what we do is we basically import the component. Here you can see import hello from components hello. And then over here, you just pass the props that you want to use. One of the things is that because this is using Webpack, it's basically just, you're just doing the reference directly based on your file path. So we have the folder components, and we're from screens. Basically go one level, then components, and get to our component itself. Cool. So there are 2 types of React components. What I've been showing are functional components. They basically just don't hold state on them. Like the data that comes into them comes through the props, and we're basically using them. And then there's also the stateful class component. So if you're using React, you'll see both of them and they can be mix and match. They're more traditional, like if you come from an object-oriented background, they follow the classes and they need to be extended from the base React components. State in them basically looks like props, but it's like private to the class, and you use set state to manipulate it for the state inside. For the presentation, most of my components are going to be in the functional style. I don't think I have any stateful components here. Cool. I just want to make a note. So the files that you were seeing were basically TSX. So TSX is the file termination for like the TypeScript React files. It's basically the same as a JSX file, like in normal React. It's just basically like also doing like the TypeScript conversion. So that from TSX, basically we produce the React components. This page on the TypeScript language has a really good explanation on how it works if you are interested more on the process. And I would recommend checking it out if you decide to like use this framework and like move ahead with using React Native. Okay. So on the next part, I just wanted to walk back here for like kind of the basics of React to make sure that if somebody's new completely to React, they can understand what's going on. So the next part, what I want to do is kind of do a tour of at least what I find to be the most used items. So we're going to go through the view, text, image, button, text input, and scroll view. Basically, the format that I'm going to do this is like one slide is going to contain a few points that I want to remind us of each item, and then like a little demo code, and we'll jump back and forth for the demo code. So first, the view, it's a component meant for nesting. It's basically what we're going to use to do our layouts. It's based on flexbox. So basically you can like do rows and like set them to be proportional or like how big it wants. The whole idea is like you got a grid that basically expands and contracts. It is our basic component for doing layouts, and it's meant for nesting. What this means is that it can hold children inside. So basically it can hold one or more components inside of it. And it's going to be the most simple, basically styling component that layout component that we are going to be using in React Native. Like almost every single other layout component is basically based on this. The next thing is text. The text block is basically what's going to show us like the easiest way to get text showing on our screen. It supports nesting, styling, and touch handling. The most common touch-based things used on text control, it's on press. I'm gonna like, so basically here we have it. It's called view and text. This is my demo component. And basically we have a method called generate text, which basically is just concatenating dynamics text to J, just to show that it can be done in a method. Inside here, we have a view that contains two views. One that's calling generate text inside a text element, and one that's just calling static and just showing like how we do static text. In terms of style, all I'm saying is flex direction row. So they're one next to each other, and just basically saying that setting the height for that row. So I'm going to jump to the code real quick and show where I'm using that. So it's on my tab 2 screen. Here it's where I'm importing it. And basically I'm just using it here. Since I didn't put any props into this component, it's basically just laying out one way. It's going to be just basically show what we put in. And this is here the code that I was just showing on the presentation. So if we load this and I go to tab 2, we can see here dynamics text yay. So that's apart from the method, basically generating the text. And here we can see the static text. If we look at the code, so the generated text, all we did was parentheses, call that function. So anything that you hear in terms of dynamic text, you can do. And then for the static, we just basically just type into the component and it already like picks it up and like will show the text. As you can see in the flex, I basically was able to put like what proportion I wanted in terms of size. So you can modify this to basically like indicate how large or small do you want it. Cool. The next ones that I want to talk about, images, image and button. So image basically displays images like PNG, like JPEGs, PNGs and stuff. You can do it either local, embedded, or from the network. One of the important things is if you're using anything that's not embedded, you basically need to specify a size for images. That's important because otherwise your images won't show when you lay it out. When you do an image, there are some events on error and on progress loading that are important to use if you want to give a really good experience. On error, if you're doing any network calls, like basically loading from a website an image or a URL, you want to make sure that you have like a backup image that shows. And you want to make sure that you also have something showing there while that image loads. One of the most common approaches is to, while on progress load, basically use what's called default source and basically use a local image while you pull something from the network. So this is the component that I did for demo. Basically, it's a view. The view almost has no styling. It's just basically, again, a row. Inside of it, we have an image. And basically, we're loading from the assets the favicon, so it shows. And next to it, we have a button. And we'll talk about the bottom in a second. So if you can see the style that I'm applying, image style, I'm specifying the width and the height. So it like shows and knows how big that image we wanted on the screen. Okay, so the button is the most common element, so it clicks. There's not that much to know about a button. Like on press is basically the one thing that you want to know. It's where you want to hook up anything to happen, like any action that you want your button to do. You want to put it on press. It's like the most common event that it's used on it. And basically the property of title lets you put text directly into it, that prop. So I'm just going to run the code real quick, show it. So here it's image and button. And basically we have like, I'm just loading this from the same project. This is an asset that comes, when you auto-generate your project, this asset comes in there. So if you run the auto generation for the TypeScript tab project, you can basically paste this code and it should work. And then we're just going to see whenever we press the button, we're just going to see it in the console. That's all we're doing, logging in the console. And we're basically loading this on the file tab2 screen TSX. So basically this here is where I import it. And down here is where I'm actually using it. Again, for simplicity's sake, I'm not passing props. So here we go. We're going to go to tab 2, and you can see it here. If I open my console, pressing F12, and I press it, we see the message that says we can do things. So basically, the event is hooked. The last part that I want to talk about is the scroll view component. Scroll view gets used a lot whenever you have a part that you want to set fixed and be able to scroll on that part, but leave the top without a scroller. So one of the things is this needs to be in a bounded context. In this case, it's in safe area view. Safe area view, it's a iOS specific component, and basically what it means is like it's kind of the size of the first render. It can be used interchangeable with another component called flatlist, but they're a little bit different in that scroll view loads everything at once. Flatlist does it as you go scrolling. And this is important to remember because if you are putting a lot of data into your scroll view, you probably want to use a flatlist. Additionally, flatlist has some other UI elements that it separates every item inside with basically like a separator with a separator. So if you don't want that separator and you're using a flat list, you need to like do some styling to make sure that you modify it. So this demo is pretty simple. I'm just using a lot of text and like a few buttons inside just to be able to like show a scroll area and basically like show what a fixed scroll is. I had to cut the code because it wouldn't fit on the slide. It's a little bit longer on the actual, but it's just text. I'm just basically filling it. So this is a scroll view demo. I put this in a separate tab. Basically, I created another tab. So the original, if you run the creator, basically the creator will only have 2 tabs. This was just another tab that I added, so I could like put the scroll view by itself, because it just didn't look good with the other 2. So I'm gonna go to tab 3, and here you can see like this is basically just the normal stuff that came with them, and then here you can see my scroller. Sorry, it was out of the window. You can see the scroller. Basically, this is the fixed section from adding this, and we have our buttons, which are like those blue bars, and then basically just the filler text inside. So that was basically the tour that I wanted to give other components. Those are like really about pretty much the basic components you can use on React Native. I only have like 5 more slides. I just want to talk a little bit about navigation. So on this project, we've been using the bottom tab component navigator. This is part of an expansion to React. It's basically something that doesn't really, like it comes with, if you use one of the kits, especially if you use that 2-tab option when you're like building your project. But it's another library. It's like a separate one. And if you go to React Native documents in GitHub, you can see that there's more options. Using this bottom menu tabs is just the one that I'm using because it comes with the standard kit. Just to explain to people how that works, basically when the app starts, it goes to the files in the index.tsx. It loads the bottom tab navigator. This basically inside this file, it will basically hold your screens. On click on the bottom bar, basically any of the 3 screens get loaded, and the screens are the ones in charge of basically loading any of our components. What's the difference between a screen and a component? Honestly, not much. It's just a convention. Normally, screens would get named when they're used by navigation. It's a convention that was done by basically React Navigation Library. Technically, you only want to play logic related to interacting with navigation. And what that means is that you don't want to like put any methods here that do anything unless it's like passing information from one screen to another. So the navigation component, in our case, butternavigator.tsx, is where all the logic basically is held. For example, this is my method that moves us when we click to tab 3 screen. And it's basically, in my case, where I'm just passing a name and telling it what component to load, basically. If you run the demo app from the initial app, the init from